this is just a little message that not everything in this talk will be applicable to you and your organization. It's quite broad, but we hope that you can take just one or two things away and implement them to help you get more efficient.
So we first wanted to start off by addressing what we mean by efficiency. We all know what these words on the screen mean, but what are we referring to when applying them specifically to ArcGIS? With time, it might be how long it takes to find, update, publish, or reuse content. Effort, how many manual steps, workarounds, or repeated tasks are involved. Consistency, do outputs look and behave the same regardless of who's created them? Reuse, can content be used once and relied on many times? And finally, reliability, do workflows work the same way every time with fewer errors? So today we're representing a fictitious utility organization called Electra Utilities. And in this scenario, we have taken up management of the GIS team. Now, the aim of this session is not to do a technical deep dive on improving efficiency, but to give you top tips and insights into how you can start to improve the efficiency with small and powerful changes. So with this in mind, we're going to be looking at content management and workflow setup. So what you can see on the screen now is a checklist of the common issues we're facing in the business. On the content management side, we're really struggling with how we manage and scale our GIS content. I've noticed that a lack of standardization and reusable templates means that content is being created inconsistently across the organization. This is then combined with a lack of information about our content, making it really difficult for colleagues to find what they need or trust that it's current or authoritative. And at the same time, we're struggling to manage access and permissions to ensure the right people have the right level of access internally and externally.
On the technical side of things, we found that our team is spending a lot of time on long workflows that are eating a lot of their time. Similarly, we have a lot of repeat requests coming in from external teams that we have to keep fulfilling and eating away at our time. To free up some of that time, we're going to be looking at automation and how that can free up our staff for innovation and new projects.
So kicking off the session, we're going to have a look at improving efficiency in the organization with templating and standardization. Starting with app templates. So they might seem simple, but they're crucial for consistency. App templates allow us to build web apps from web maps and scenes without writing code, helping us get apps up and running really quickly. They're designed around common use cases and can be easily configured to meet individual needs whilst ensuring that applications look and behave consistently. One of the reasons we see inconsistent GIS across the organization is that people often start from scratch when they're sharing their maps or insights. And this then results in different layouts, functionality, and user experiences, even if the purpose is the same. So when choosing an app template, it's important to consider a few different things. The first one is purpose. So who is the app for? What do you want users to take away? And does it add value to the organization? The next one is functionality. So what core functionality is needed to support that goal? Which widgets or tools do users need to get the most from the app? And finally, aesthetic. How do the layout and color scheme support your brand and message? And will the app align visually with your organization's existing applications? So they help us provide a defined purpose, built-in functionality, and a consistent look and feel, meaning that we can focus on the messaging of our app as opposed to the mechanics. So when do templates make sense to be used? Well, it might be when the audience are non-GIS users. You need it live, quickly. You want consistency across your projects, and you don't need any heavy custom code. So where can we find app templates? Well, across the ArcGIS platform, many mobile apps and app builders already offer predefined templates, and we can see this amongst ArcGIS dashboards, instant apps, experience builder, story maps, field maps, and more. So if ArcGIS already gives us templates, the next question is, why isn't this possibly enough on its own? Whilst templates act as a really strong starting point, they're not necessarily designed specifically for us. They give us good structure and function, but they don't define our branding or our color palette, our naming conventions, and how content should be presented across teams. Therefore, by building our own organization template using one of these apps, we can start to create default branding and give our colleagues a safe, trusted starting point. So we'll have a look at one of the ways in which we can do that. So of all of the apps that I've just mentioned, I've decided to use Story Maps to showcase creating a template. So I'm in the Story Maps application at the moment, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. Now, instead of selecting a story map, I'm going to navigate straight to Theme. Once I'm in here, I'm able to see any existing themes that I've created or that have been shared with me, but I want to go ahead in this instance and click Generate Theme. This is a capability within Story Maps that allows me to describe the theme I would like to create, as well as upload any images to help guide on font and color schemes. So in this case, it's a really great opportunity to use the company's logo. Once that theme is then generated, I can start to scroll through to check that I'm happy with the presentation. And Story Maps is really useful in the sense that it gives us templates for how different content display options might look. For example, things like base maps and bar charts and the accent colors that have been chosen. So once checking this, I could then decide to regenerate it if I want a slightly different theme, or I could decide to save it and then edit it further. So here is where I can make those further tweaks, such as being able to dictate the default base map. I could also go in and add the company logo. And I can also think about setting a title for my new Story Maps theme as well. Now, my favorite thing about this feature is that I'm then able to access the hex codes for the accent colors that have been chosen. And I like this because it means that I can use these hex codes across other applications to ensure that the branding and color palettes are consistent. So now that I'm quite happy with this, I can go ahead and publish my theme and share it with the rest of the organization for them to use as a starting point. So by creating and utilizing organization-wide templates with the right color palettes and branding, we can start to create professional and consistent-looking applications across the board. So continuing with the theme of templating and standardization, there are many small but impactful configuration changes we can make within our data layers and our maps to ensure a consistent experience. And the idea with these tweaks is that we're reducing the need for repeated manual restyling, whilst ensuring that the most important information is displayed in a clear and recognizable manner. So some of the things we could start to look at are configuring organization-specific symbology, and this could be as simple as choosing symbology from existing designs or creating your own custom symbology that can be shared with your organization. It might be producing a custom base map gallery, ensuring that members of your organization keep their base map choices consistent and in line with the organization's themes. It might be a really simple case of actually just defining the visibility range of your data layers to ensure that maps are performing efficiently, reducing lag time for large and dense data sets to load at a national level, but also just to reduce your map clutter. And again, we're ensuring here that the most important information is viewed at the appropriate level. It could be enabling layer labels, giving your users additional information about the data at hand at the first glance. So, for example, using an assets ID or any other critical information that could aid decision-making or just provide important context. And one last example is the option to configure your pop-up. So this is a really great way to improve efficiency for users by ensuring that they've got all of the information they need in the most readable format. And that's exactly where we're going to take a look at. So we've got 3 simple ways of how you can start to enhance your pop-ups. Before I touch on those, I just want you to start off by taking a look at our default pop-up on the screen. And it'd be interesting to see how many of you have pop-ups that are looking quite similar. So in this example, we're looking at our wayleave point data, and we can see our wayleave attribution as well as some geospatial and location-specific data. Now, as a GIS manager, this information is digestible and relevant to me. However, I need to be aware that this data set is being used across the organization, and I want to ensure that my colleagues from other departments are able to pick out key attributes specific to their needs. So, looking at my options and starting off very, very simple, we're going to take a look at how we can make immediate changes to our data by customizing how the attributes are displayed. So here I'm heading to the pop-up panel of the web map where I can see all of the available attributes. Now, as I mentioned, some of these aren't relevant to the wider business, so what I can do is start reviewing the field list and beginning to remove any fields that I feel don't add value. Once I've done this, I can then think about rearranging the remaining fields so that the most important information is appearing at the top of the pop-up. And rest assured that when we're doing this, we're only making changes to how the data is displayed, and the underlying feature layer structure is remaining unchanged. Finally, I can then add a clear title to the pop-up. And in this example, I'm also going to specify the county for this data set to provide better context for the users. So once I've done this, if we have a look at our pop-up now, we'll be able to see that our attributes have been refined, and we're also displaying the most important information at the top. So as I mentioned, a very simple way to start improving the efficiency of digesting that information. The next quick way of improving readability is through text formatting. So as much as I love a clean data table, I much prefer being able to read and understand my data in a way that feels a bit more intuitive. And this is where we can start to add different elements to our pop-ups, such as a simple text element. By doing this, we're able to alter how our information is displayed in a text format. By simply adding our required fields and creating bold headings, we can also go in and add additional descriptions for fields that might not immediately make sense to other users. And we can also think about possibly adding in attached images to make sure that we're giving the user a full view of the situation. So again, if we have another look at our pop-up now that we've edited it, we'll be able to see that our attributes are now grouped in clear and related sections in a simple format with the related attachments for that full overview of our wayleave. Finally, we can start to introduce some conditional logic to our attribution. So instead of displaying values in their recorded format, we can add logic that allows the information to be displayed in a different way. And again, the idea of this is that we're improving the readability of our pop-up. So we're going to go in and add content again, but this time we're going to choose Arcade. And in the example that I've created, I've added conditional logic for my sensitive areas field. I know that my data table is populated with yes and no, depending on whether or not it's a sensitive area, but I wanted to make it more apparent to the user that they need to proceed with caution should the area be sensitive. Therefore, the Arcade expression is saying that if the sensitive area field is yes, then the text returned in our pop-up should be caution sensitive area. On the right-hand side, you can see our expression builder and that we have several function options as well as suggested Arcade expressions to help guide us with producing richer pop-ups. So there's examples in here for adding things like charts. So again, one final time, if we have another look at our pop-up, we can now see some of those changes in action. Now, in this instance, I'm just going to scroll straight down to the sensitive area field, and we can see there that my conditional logic has been returned instead of the value yes. And you might be wondering why I'm showing you things like pop-ups, and that's just because efficiency is so many different things. And by configuring these pop-ups, we're helping the organization understand their business data a lot more quickly. So we've had a look at a few ways in which we can start to create some standardization with the data and content by using some templating methods. But we're now going to have a look at how we can improve efficiency in managing our metadata and data hygiene. Before that, I just wanted to clarify what we mean by metadata and data. So data hygiene is quality, cleanliness, and consistency of actual spatial data and attributes. And metadata hygiene is the quality, completeness, and usefulness of the documentation that is describing your data. So again, have another look on the screen and see whether or not the overview of your content might look the same. Now, we've all been there, and I'm still very, very guilty of doing this now, and that is publishing a map or a feature layer really quickly just to get it up and running. And in doing so, details like the description, summary, tags, and terms of use are often getting missed. The information score bar makes that clear on the main page, showing us that the item lacks supporting key details. Now, I published it, so I know what the data is and what it's used for, but I also need to consider what long-term challenges my colleagues who need this data are going to face. So let's have a look at how we can resolve this. So I'm on the overview page of the Whaley's feature layer again. We know the documentation is currently very limited. If we scroll to the bottom right, the item information panel already starts to highlight suggestions for improving the quality of our data documentation. So this is a really great, helpful starting point. The metadata editor, however, is a particularly valuable option as it offers a guided experience for improving our metadata quality. It clearly shows which elements are complete and which ones still need to be populated. You can also define your metadata styles, which control which fields are displayed, the level of detail, and the standards that the metadata aligns to. Although still in beta, we also have the Suggest tool. And this can analyze the data layer and automatically generate a title, summary, description, and tags. And these can then be reviewed and refined before you save them, but it's a really great way to start significantly improving our efficiency when we're thinking about creating the documentation. It might seem like a bit of a dry topic. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it's becoming more and more crucial with the increase of AI agents in ArcGIS. So it's been suggested that one of the ways in which to get the most effective and valuable outputs from your AI agents is starting with the quality of your metadata. And therefore, it makes this step of your content management a really great place to start. So this is great, but it's still not enough. There are still challenges around the governance of this process. Over time, it might be that the documentation process is done once and then forgotten. There might be changes in how the data is used or its importance and purpose. There may be crucial updates to the data sets, or it may be that ownership may change hands with evolving team structures. And there may also become inconsistencies in the way that the information is documented. And this is why the governance of this process is really important. And it might be that creating a review schedule is enough to keep track of your content over time, where individuals have a list of things to check, and they do so every few months. But it's actually where automation can play a huge part instead. So on the screen are two possible approaches to introducing automation. Our first method of automation is data pipelines. And these are all about controlling how your data gets into ArcGIS. They provide a structured way to ingest, transform, validate, and publish data so that ArcGIS is always reflecting the most trusted and up-to-date content. So this can be especially important if your organization is pulling content from flat files such as CSVs, APIs and web services, and any third-party business systems. Our second method of automation are notebooks. So ArcGIS notebooks are a built-in data science and automation environment within ArcGIS based on Jupyter notebooks. And they allow you to use Python directly inside of your ArcGIS Online or your enterprise to interact with data, users, and content. Now, if you're someone like me, you may have very limited Python knowledge, but you'll be happy to hear that we do have loads of available resources online to help you get up and running. And this is where you can find notebook samples and API references. Again, if you're also someone like me, you might have a colleague called Adam, who is a Python wizard and is actually kind enough to create you a notebook instead. So this is an example of a notebook. And in this example, I've asked Adam to help me identify items based off of a few important parameters. The purpose of this automation is to help me identify low-value or poorly maintained content layers. Firstly, we're asking the notebook to help identify items with zero views, helping to surface test or unused content. And to keep that process targeted, we've also limited the search to a specific group. Secondly, it flags items with creation dates that are older than a year, as it may be that these are no longer authoritative. They might contain outdated metadata, or they might just be a duplicate of an existing data set. Finally, it identifies items with no tags or descriptions, providing visibility of content with poor metadata. So when the notebook is run, the results are displayed as a simple list. And in this instance, we don't have any items with 0 views, but the outage does provide useful insight into overall usage. So there are several items with very low view counts that I might want to have a look into. No items were flagged as older than a year. However, we have found lots of items that are missing tags and descriptions. So these results could be exported for further sharing and review with the appropriate content owners. So notebooks are great for helping automate content management, but they can also be used in many other circumstances, such as performing spatial analysis in your workflows and the batch processing of data. So we're aware there are a few options available to us in terms of keeping on top of our data and metadata. But let's now have a look at what we can do to combat our issues around sharing this content and ensuring the correct level of visibility. So effective sharing and visibility are crucial, and without them, we're at risk of facing several common challenges. So the first one being data silos. So when authoritative data content is hard to find, teams might end up recreating maps, layers, dashboards, and apps, leading to duplication and conflicting versions of the truth. It might lead to poor decision-making, so unclear ownership or weak visibility controls can result in users relying on outdated or incorrect data, which then undermines the operational decisions. With security and compliance risks, it might be that oversharing is exposing sensitive data, whilst undersharing can block access for critical teams. And last but not least, if users are unsure which data is authoritative, who owns it, and whether dashboards are current or if maps are fit for operational use, then confidence in the platform quickly erodes. So it's a long list, but it highlights why efficient content sharing matters. So now that I've hopefully made the case, let's have a look at what managing content effectively can do for our organization. So it can help users quickly find and use the data they need, whilst control editing permissions protect data consistency and security. It gives clear visibility, supporting efficient collaboration and enabling teams to view locations from different perspectives. So, for example, if we're thinking back to our Wayleave data, we could combine this with the organization's infrastructure data, project delivery data, customer demand, and field data. It gives us streamlined access, which means our GIS admins can focus more on innovation and improving GIS across the organization, as opposed to managing content access requests. Okay, great. So how? There are many different approaches you can take to achieve this, and on the screen are just 3 examples. We could also consider things like distributed and partner collaborations. So these are methods for allowing organizations to connect and share content with external stakeholders who also have their own ArcGIS Online or Enterprise portals. But in this quick demo, we're going to take a look at what content categories are, why they're useful, and how they can be set up in your ArcGIS portal. And just a quick note as well that this is more so a quick tip for the ArcGIS portal admins. So content categories provide a structured, hierarchical way to organize ArcGIS items by theme or subject, rather than by item type or owner. They essentially act as metadata labels, making content easier to browse and filter across an organization or within specific groups. So categories can be as broad as environment, with subcategories being things like flood risk. And to configure these content categories, you can do that in the settings of your organization page and heading to items. Before setting them up, it is really important to actually define a clear structure or strategy, making sure that you're keeping top-level categories quite broad and stable, avoiding deep hierarchies, and considering the long-term relevance of your choices. You could also decide to configure categories at a group level. So this can be done via the group's content pane. And this allows you to create custom schemas for specific projects or audiences. And linking back to templating, there are actually several available templates to kind of help inspire your decisions and get you up and running with your categories. After we've dictated these, we can then just apply the relevant categories on each of the items page. So this provides a really powerful, consistent way to actually start organizing and discovering content using more structured themes. So we've successfully identified a few ways in which we become more efficient with our content management. But I'm now going to hand over to Callum, who's going to take us through some top tips and insights for managing our workflows.
Thank you very much, Izzy. If you recall at the start, I mentioned that the issues we're facing today refer to things such as long, arduous workflows and repeated requests from external teams. We're going to try and automate some of our work to free up time for our staff to do more interesting things, frankly. To do so, I'm going to be running through a number of options for automation within ArcGIS. Izzy has already spoke about notebooks and data pipelines, so instead I'll be focusing on Model Builder, ArcGIS Workflow Manager, and ArcGIS Connector for Power Automate. Starting with Model Builder now, it is, we have a workflow here that is 4 tools. It may not take you long to set up, but if you're doing this 3 times a day, which then turns into 15 times a week, however many over a month, and especially over a year, the time adds up really quickly. Therefore, it's more efficient for us to incorporate all of this into a model. Model Builder is available in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online, and essentially turns all these string of tools into one geoprocessing tool, which you can run with the click of a button. As of the February 2026 update to ArcGIS Online, tools that we create in ArcGIS Online are now available to be published as web tools, meaning we can embed them in things like Experience Builder applications. With that in mind, how can we break down what Model Builder does for our efficiencies? In order to look at this, I've brought back the 5 key components that Izzy identified earlier: the time, the effort, the consistency, reuse, and reliability of what we're doing. Model Builder is quite a simple one, thankfully. It's automated, so we save time, we save effort. It's consistent and it's reliable because it runs the exact same way every time. If we do have errors, the good news is that they'll at least be consistent so we can get to the bottom of it faster. And because we have that ability to embed a web tool within an Experience Builder application, we can go to other teams with this application and they can self-serve their repeated requests. This frees up so much time, not only for our team, but for theirs as well, to look at new, innovative projects. So Model Builder certainly seems to tick all of our boxes, doesn't it? But it's important that we consider all of our options before we move on and dive straight into working with Model Builder. For that reason, I'm going to talk about ArcGIS Workflow Manager. Workflow Manager allows for semi or fully automated workflows to be created. We call them jobs. Within these jobs are individual tasks. And my favorite feature about Workflow Manager, it's going to sound really benign and I apologize, is that you can add descriptions to tasks. Ooh. But when paired with the ability to open up any application within Workflow Manager's interface, we then have a way to guide a user on exactly what they need to do. This can help onboard staff quicker, and it can also help upskill anyone should a crucial team member be away from work for any reason, hopefully plugging any single points of failure. This all sounds good, but we need to understand what Workflow Manager actually looks like. So this is what a standard job looks like. It's essentially a flowchart. Within it, we have individual boxes, which are tasks. There's 2 that I really want to draw your eye to, which are the orange boxes. These are called advanced assignments. This lets the person who's driving the workflow pass it on to someone else. You can pair that with an email notification to ensure that the person the work is being handed to is aware of it and can pick it up as soon as they have availability. The second I'd like to draw your attention to is the green diamonds. These are questions. The user is provided with a list of choices, and depending on what they select, you can change how the workflow runs. So essentially, if we're QAing or QCing edits, and we say, yes, I like what you've done, but there's a few things that need tweaking. Rather than finishing it or just deleting it, we could send it back to the editor to formalize that process and make sure everything's how we want it to be. I'm going to show you a video now of what your staff member will see while working on this. It's a different example which focuses on the versioning of data sets. So this is what Workflow Manager looks like, and a job will start up, allowing us to add attachments. We're going to fly through this, so we're not going to be doing much, but we then get to review things, so there is that manual input if you need it. It creates the version of the dataset automatically, and then we can assign it to someone for edits. We're going to be passing it to Jenny, who was kind enough to make this Workflow Manager application for me. Then, obviously, this won't happen in an actual case, but we can see that it's been assigned to us. You don't normally see both sides of that process, so just because Jenny's driving it, we see both of them. We can then open up UNE within Workflow Manager, and you can see that description field on the right-hand side where you can input information for a user guide. We're going to then assign it for approval because we haven't actually made any edits. Jenny will take it on again, as she's a fantastic one-woman band, and then we'll open UNE once more. Obviously, if you're actually QAing and QCing and actually editing, these things would take longer. But this is to show us the capabilities of what we can do. So here's the question. It pops up, and we will choose that we do approve the edits. And to end it off, we'll reconcile and post the new version of the dataset. We'll clean up what was left behind. We'll send everyone an email notifying them of that fact. And then that is the end. This is how simple it is to run a workflow through in Workflow Manager. I could wax lyrical about how efficient it is, but it's good to break it down into these key themes. First is the time that's saved. Obviously, I haven't ticked effort off because if you're doing a semi-automated workflow, you are still going to have to go in and do that edit or that QC process. Obviously, other workflows are available. And because we've got this established workflow and everyone knows what they're responsible for, it really helps build that consistency. And because we've hopefully given users a guide on what they need to do, we can build our resiliency as an organization and plug those single points of failure. This will make us more efficient. Another fun thing to add is that we can add model builders into a workflow manager, meaning we can automate our automation. So again, it ticks a lot of the boxes, and Workflow Manager is genuinely fantastic. But I have a couple of questions to ask everyone before we move on to the next section. And that is, if these things sound familiar. I want people to nod if they do. Do you have co-workers who struggle to open PDFs? I'm seeing a concerning amount of nodding here. Do you have important updates that get lost in a shared inbox void because nobody wants to take responsibility for them? And are you pulling out your hair trying to accommodate both of the above? If so, I'm really sorry. If not, let's rephrase it a little. Do you have teams working across multiple technologies? Do you have a constant pipeline of data from suppliers? And do you have field teams in need of up-to-date information? I'm seeing a few more nods now, which is good. In which case, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the ArcGIS connector for Power Automate. This technology is our offering to directly integrate with Power Automate, which is Microsoft's application to automate. It's in the name. It's really handy because it allows us to serve geospatial information to people who may not have the time or ability to engage with GIS to the extent that we do. There's direct integration with almost every Microsoft product you can think of. Outlook, Planner, SharePoint, DevOps, OneDrive, Teams, Excel, PowerPoint, the list goes on and on. And crucially, we actually have 3 versions of this too. So if you're on ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, or ArcGIS Location Platform, there is a version for you. The sad news about this, however, is that I actually don't have enough time to talk to you today about all the amazing things that you can do with this technology. There is amazing documentation that can be found on Microsoft's side in terms of each and every individual tool and the ins and outs of it. For now, though, I'm going to run you through a few examples, talk to you about my favorite tools, and also give you some housekeeping tips to make sure that we use Power Automate responsibly. This is what a flow looks like. In Workflow Manager, it's called a job. In Power Automate, we call it a flow. Essentially, it's a flow chart. We move through the steps. What we have at the top is called a trigger. That means that when an email arrives, it will run all the consequent steps. Now, I don't know about you. I get quite a few emails in a day, so it's not ideal if this is running every single time. And so we get to add customization to that trigger. So we can specify that the email has to come from someone. So in this instance, I could say that the email has to come from Izzy if it wants to trigger this flow. It could be that we've agreed on a specific subject line that must be used if we want it to run. And because we're dealing with attachments in this example, the email must have an attachment attached if we want to run the flow. We then parse the JSON. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But essentially what that allows us to do is pull that attachment from the email. And then the final step is using the ArcGIS connector to upload that attachment directly to a feature layer. It's absolutely fantastic. But let's recontextualize this in the guise of electric utilities. What's an actual use case for this? So let's say we have a site plan, or perhaps a photo of an asset that is sent through by a supplier. This will trigger the flow. And simply put, the information is updated instantly. Your field team have that information, which could be crucial to their safety. I'm going to say more importantly, it's obviously not more important than anyone's safety, but you don't have to do any admin, and that's pretty nice. Similarly, we can use Power Automate for auditing. So there are ArcGIS-specific triggers within the connector, such as this one, when a record is created in a feature layer. There's also similar ones for edits and deletions. So we can trigger this flow when a new feature is added to a specific feature layer. We can then get details of the change using the fetch updates, changes, or deletions from feature layer tool before doing practically whatever we want with it. We could send people an email to confirm that they're happy with the edits, the addition that they've made. We could email ourselves a paper trail. We could put it in a SharePoint list, or we could put it on a planner board or a DevOps board and assign it to someone to ensure that they have that responsibility and they know it's there. Auditing is very important when it comes to efficiency, surprisingly, because ultimately, if you can track how many edits, additions, and deletions are happening to your layers, you can tell which ones are at risk of suffering performance issues. If your layer starts being slower, going down, it's not very good for efficiency, so we're trying to avoid that. So with a couple of examples out the way, I'm going to run you through a few of my favorite tools. The first one we have talked about, which is the fetch updates, changes, and deletions from feature layers. This is the bread and butter of the ArcGIS connector for Power Automate. The power, I think, lies in the versatility, because you can practically do anything with that information. With point-to-point routing, it does what you'd expect. You can make a maximum of 150 points at once. So if you had a list of addresses come through in an email, you could then find the most efficient way of getting between them without opening ArcGIS Online. Third is another instance of automating our automation. We can run a data pipeline. Now, data pipelines by default allows you to run it a maximum of once every 15 minutes. You could run it once an hour, once a day. But with Power Automate, you're able to have more control over what triggers it. Is it when a specific feature is edited in a feature layer? Is it when a certain email comes in from your manager telling them it needs to be ready soon? Things like that. And finally, we can geocode and reverse geocode addresses. So we may get a list of coordinates or a list of addresses, and we can get the inverse back from this tool. Obviously, I hope everyone's familiar with geocoding. The neat part about this, though, is that the output can be put directly into other ArcGIS for Microsoft technologies, be that ArcGIS for Fabric or ArcGIS for Power BI, meaning it can go straight onto your Power BI dashboard for your users to see. For some, I say tips and tricks here, really it's a bit of housekeeping to make sure we're using the technology sustainably. ArcGIS connectors have a throttle of 250 calls per minute. So if you think you're going to be triggering more than that, it's worthwhile ensuring that you have multiple accounts set up. Similarly, you can only pull 1,000 rows from a feature layer at once. So if you have a feature layer with 3,000 features, you're going to need to make 3 calls to ensure that no data falls into the cracks. It's also important that you regularly log in because Power Automate will log you out of the connection to ArcGIS occasionally to ensure cybersecurity is met and basically your account and work is safe. At the top there is the aforementioned parse action. It lets us dissect information from previous steps in the flow. It does this by messing with JSONs, which I know for every GIS person in the room is going to set off alarm bells. Do not worry, no applications are harmed in the process. This is simply working with the output of previous steps in Power Automate. We can pull information like an attachment or like someone's name from an email and use it as dynamic content for future steps. This brings us to the end of my section, where I can give myself a big pat on the back as we spoke about how automation in Model Builder, Workflow Manager, and the ArcGIS connector for Power Automate can help you be more efficient as a team. Izzy also covered how templating and standardization and metadata hygiene, along with data hygiene and sharing and visibility, can help us be more efficient by having that confidence in our data and a strong base to work from. This is just the beginning of what you can do to be more efficient as a team. There are endless options, essentially. The sky is the limit. You can never truly be fully efficient. You can look at scalability, you could look at workflow setup, you could look at training and adoption. There's always something more to do. Thank you very much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed. And if you can take one single thing away from this presentation and put it into action at your organization, we've done a fantastic job. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll hand you back over to Claudia.